Hi, good morning everybody, and a very warm welcome to the SME Club by Pro Manchester, very proudly sponsored by us at Virgin Money. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name's Ruby and I'm usually the events coordinator in our Market Street store in Manchester. But as we all continue to work from home, it's been fantastic to still bring you and connect with you through these virtual online events. And through the COVID crisis, our main priority is supporting our customers. So all the information that we provide can be found on our website, and we'll make sure that that is circulated to you following the event. And we'd love to know your thoughts on today's event, so do tag us in any of your social posts. We're at Virgin Money on all social platforms, and we really encourage you to ask our speaker Shelley some questions throughout today's event, and you can do that by clicking on the small dialogue box with the question mark, and that'll be submitted to Shelley to answer when she's ready. And today's event is creating a growth mindset, and if you're ready, Shelley, I'll pass over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shelley Rubenstein, and I'm going to be delivering today's webinar on creating a growth mindset to improve performance. So as Ruby's just said, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. And if you've got any specific questions that are for Pro Manchester or Virgin Money, then please indicate that in the questions. And we'll be monitoring the Q&A so we can help to support you in an efficient way. So at the end, we're going to have some questions related to the webinar. So we'll have about 5 minutes. And there may be some things that we can't answer straight away. So please bear with us and we'll get back to you. And the webinar is recording, and we'll send slides out after the session, along with an article that we've written about growth mindset, which I think is also on the Pro Manchester website and on our website. It'd probably be handy for you to have something to take notes with, because we're going to make it very interactive. So I'll be asking you to take part. For those of you who've been involved in our webinars before, you'll know that we make them very interactive. And we're going to ask you to reflect on certain issues as we go along. So let's start getting to know each other. So if we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so I've got somebody operating the slides, and they're probably struggling to move on to the next slide. So I'll just tell you what was going to be on it. So we're going to learn a little bit more about each other. And what I'd like you to do in the Q&A is to type your name and where you're joining us from, your company or the geography. It will be good to see some familiar faces. I'm sure there's people who've been on our webinars before. So it would be nice to meet you all virtually, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Oh, so I've just been told that you can see the next slide, but I can't. So hopefully somebody will put in the Q&A if that's the case. So Catherine, if you could let me know that if everyone can see the slides. So just to say a bit more about myself. So I'm Shelley Rubenstein, and I'm a chartered psychologist, an occupational psychologist, and I've spent over 30 years applying the principles of psychology to the workplace. And I founded Impact Psychology for Business, Impact Consulting Psychologist, 26 years ago. And the areas that I work in are in executive coaching, leadership development, organizational change, individual and team performance, resilience, mediation, and diversity and inclusion, which is very topical at the moment in terms of Black Lives Matter. But ultimately, any way in which I can help deliver people-centered value to a business is something that really excites me. So please don't hesitate to ask me anything. But if you're interested in finding out a bit more about our website, about us, you can go to. So Sharon from First Executive Recruitment, you're telling me that you can't see the slide. Thank you for that feedback. So my colleague Ro, who is operating the slides, she can see that they're moving on, but somehow they're not. So I'm just wondering what's going to be the best thing to do, because this hasn't happened to us before. So I'm just wondering whether it might be better if I had the slides and shared them. Can you all bear with me for one moment, and I'll just ask Catherine what we should do. Catherine, do you think you could just unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Right, so
I think Ro's going to try resharing.
Okay.
Can you try scrolling through them a bit, Ro? There we go.
That's
working.
the slide. So I don't know what happened. It must have frozen. So if you put us back on again.
No problem. Here you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're back. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for your patience, and all the people who have asked about the slide. Yeah, great to meet you, Fanny from GWA Law. That's really nice to see you. We can publish all of these people. Great to meet everybody. So let's move on then to talk about today's webinar, now that we've got over those teething problems and we've maintained our growth mindset. So Ro, if you want to move on to the next slide. Morning, Rob from Reedsmore. Yeah, I'm just wondering whether this is going to be a continuing problem. Great. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing today is explaining the research behind growth mindsets. We're going to give you some practical tips that you'll be able to apply to your business, bearing in mind this is the SME Forum, which we are a member, and we're going to enable you to find ways to apply the theory in your daily situation. So let's move on to talk about mindset, the whole concept of mindset. And have you ever wondered what separates success and failure? So there's a professor of psychology at Stanford University in the States called Carol Dweck, and she says it's all about mindset, that the difference between success and failure is all about mindset. She studies human motivation, and she spends her days diving into why people succeed or don't, and what's within our control to foster success. So mindset is the way that people think about ability and talent. And her theory of the two mindsets and the difference that they make in outcomes is incredibly powerful. I'm going to share that with you today. Her work shows the power of our most basic beliefs, whether conscious or unconscious. They strongly affect what we want and whether we succeed in getting it. Much of what we think that we understand of our personality actually comes from our mindset. This both propels us forward and also prevents us from fulfilling our potential, depending on the way that we see it. And she distinguishes between two mindsets, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And in the next couple of slides, we're going to examine both of those. So moving first to the fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset firstly assumes that our character, our intelligence, and our creative ability are static givens, which we can't change in any meaningful way. And that any success is the affirmation of that inherent or inbuilt intelligence rather than something that can be developed. In a fixed mindset, we're measuring the static ability against an equally fixed standard. We're all familiar, because we'll have gone through it from school, with the concept of IQ, or intelligence quotient. But that's also a static measure. So striving for success and avoiding failure at all costs become a way of maintaining this sense of being clever or skilled in a traditional way, such as is measured by IQ. So let's think about somebody who has a fixed mindset and how they might approach a challenging situation. So let's call them Andy. So Andy may have certain goals that he would like to achieve. For example, a promotion. I'm sure we'd all like that. Imagine that unfortunately he doesn't obtain his goal. He doesn't get the promotion that he's been striving to achieve for ages. He's more likely to see it as a failure, give up and not try again, because he will believe that not getting that promotion is a failure. Because in his eyes, everything is either a failure or a success. And he's left feeling either pleased if he makes it or disappointed if he doesn't. And he will then perceive it as a complete failure. Now that contrasts with the growth mindset. The growth mindset thrives on challenge. It sees failure not as evidence of unintelligence, but as a heartening springboard for growth and for stretching our existing abilities. The individual with a growth mindset believes that their intelligence, their talent, their skills are not fixed, but can be developed through dedication and hard work. Mistakes are seen as opportunities to improve. And it's not only individuals, but also organisations that can have a growth mindset. A growth mindset organisation fosters a culture that views every employee as having great potential, every employee, where colleagues are encouraged to develop and are acknowledged and rewarded for their improvements. It becomes the norm that everyone is trying to achieve more and becoming more successful when we're operating in an organisation with a growth mindset. So what can you do to change your mindset? So this is where we're going to have some more interaction time using the Q&A. And I'm going to ask you to think for a minute about what you can do about changing your mindset. Personally, you, the individual, what can I do about changing mindset? I'm going to give you a minute to look at that. And then I'm going to ask people, after they've had that minute, to share some of their ideas on the Q&A. Now, if you don't want me to share your thought, then please say that this is not for sharing, or if you don't want to put it on, that's also fine, but still have the thought. So I'll just give you a minute for that. Okay, so Sharon has said positive mental attitude always, which is great. That's really helpful. And any other ideas? So keeping your positive mental attitude, and that has been a challenge for all of us during this time of being either in lockdown. For me, it's been challenging because my husband has been shielding. So Joe O'Shea is saying actively reflect on the lessons learnt. That's great. And Sharon, tell yourself you can do it, whether or not you think you can or can't, you're right. So if you tell yourself you can do it, you will do it. That's a great one. Katie has a tip. List 3 things that I'm grateful for before bed each night. Yes, that's something that I do. I have a little gratitude journal next to the bed, and it makes you feel good. Recently, there's been a lot about nature and birdsong, and my particular favourite, home-baked sourdough. I probably had too much of that. Julie says, self-coach. Listen to your inner cheerleader as opposed to your mood hoover. I like that. Be kind to yourself and be your own best friend. Lovely. Anonymous has said to have an open mind and stay positive. Absolutely. And Chris Howarth, improve your skills to boost confidence. Yes, the more skills that we gain, the more we feel confident about that. Claire talks about reframing the situation, seeing the positive, and I'm going to be talking quite a bit about that later, and you'll be taking part in an exercise that's talking about reframing. Thanks, Claire. Rob Taylor from Reedsmore, learn to love failure. Yeah, if you're afraid to fail, you're afraid to try. Very nice. Oh, I don't think any of you need to come on this webinar. You know all the answers. Anonymous, reframe negative thoughts. Try to think growth, not fixed when facing challenges. Absolutely. Abby Owens from Big Brand Ideas. Hi, Abby. Saw you yesterday. I spend 10 minutes each morning focusing on a positive mindset for the day. Fabulous. What a great start. Even better than porridge. And Anonymous says, channeling negative feedback into positive actions rather than seeing the negativity as something that cannot change. Great. Some really good suggestions there. So thank you for taking part in that. And there's going to be more opportunities for you to share later. And I'm now going to add to some of those great ideas by sharing some information about achieving a positive mindset. So it's no easy task. I'm just going to have a sip of my drink. I don't know if anyone else is struggling with hay fever today. Hopefully I won't be coughing too much. So some of the following tips can help you to achieve a positive mindset, both in yourself and in others. So the first one is about praising wisely. Praising wisely. So other people's hard work, their strategies, their focus, their perseverance. This encourages resilience and challenge thinking, which is how people respond to the idea of challenging their own thoughts in a positive way rather than a critical way. And more emphasis is put, oh, thank you, Sharon, for your sympathy. Yes, you've got awful hay fever as well. Oh, good, I'm not alone. I'm not glad you've got the hay fever, but I'm glad I'm not alone. So when we're thinking about achieving a positive mindset, we put more emphasis on the learning process to encourage more sustained learning and greater perseverance to solve problems. We're more likely to continue trying to solve those problems if we have a positive mindset. And if you think about what we do in bringing up children, we're often praising intelligence and being correct and the talent, or we praise people because they look attractive, or those kinds of superficial things. But what's really important is not to give praise just for being correct or being the fastest or the most successful. Praise the effort that is put in. It's really important to praise the effort that's put in because it's the behaviour that people exhibit that needs to be rewarded. Ensure that failure is translated into not yet instead of I can't. So not yet instead of I can't. And people will begin to realise that the goal is still possible and worth putting effort into achieving, despite an initial setback. So this mindset increases confidence and perseverance. So as an organisation, there needs to be a focus on creating a positive, continuous learning culture. Employees need to be willing to explore new opportunities without the fear of failure. So to be supported to explore new opportunities without the fear of failure. Mistakes seen as learning opportunities for future improvement instead of being punished. So we have to know before we enable people to do things that there is a risk of failure and that we have a backstop for that and we help people to learn from it. So we wouldn't necessarily do that in an emergency situation. You have to choose and mitigate your risks. Second area I want to talk about is about changing mindsets. So a psychology study found that telling students that if they tried to tackle difficult maths problems, they could become more intelligent. So imagine being told that if you try to tackle these problems, just in the trying, you would become more intelligent. This led to the students in this study putting in more effort, and therefore, because they put that effort in, they got significantly better grades. However, the students who were not told to put this effort in because they would increase their intelligence actually showed a decrease in the grades that they were achieving. So simply having a positive and resilient mindset, believing that it is going to get better, as some of the people said in the Q&A, encourages you to try harder and not give up. It gives you more perseverance. So when leaders in an organization create a growth mindset environment with terms such as yet and not yet, you can change the mindset of the individuals that you're working with in your teams from thinking that a lot of effort and difficulty means that you're not capable into thinking of it as an opportunity to improve. If we try harder, we will do better. And everyone's in that together. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to thrive and succeed. And I really believe that learning together and sharing knowledge helps us to do better as well. So we want our employees to be committed to learning new skills, to continuously learn new skills as a team. And it doesn't necessarily have to be work related. We know from some of the things that we've learnt about preventing and reducing dementia in terms of doing puzzles, that the action of learning does something to parts of our brain. So if learning and improvement and development is a company-wide goal, it creates a supportive environment for learning. And some of the organisations we always hear about and see pretty pictures about, such as Google in the States, they encourage people to go out there and learn things that are not necessarily to do with their work. So everyone at some point will make mistakes. We all do. Even me, I make them on a daily basis. Or they will need help when learning something new. However, if we're surrounded by people who see overcoming the challenges as part of what they do, and they then succeed, it will help everyone to try and try harder. It will inspire people to see success as not yet, rather than failure. And colleagues who have mastered a skill that you may not have yet will be in a great position to help you to move forward. And that's also beneficial to them, because teaching someone else, helping someone else also cements and solidifies our own learning. And I find that, particularly over using all of these new platforms like Teams and Zoom, that in teaching my auntie how to Zoom with me has helped me to consolidate my learning. And some people believe something completely different, which is that knowledge is power. So some people, and we can see some of those people in important positions today, I'm not going to name any names, they believe that knowledge is power, and then rather than sharing it with people, they hold on to it and release it when they think it's going to have the most effect. We are not advocates of that. We believe that sharing knowledge is really important. Sharing is caring is not just a nice little phrase or a nice to have. It actually makes economic sense, because research tells us that organizations that encourage communication, share knowledge, more interactive, are more likely to be creative, innovative, and more productive. And we know that that impacts positively on the bottom line. So we're going to give you a chance now to practice having a positive mindset. So if you've got something that you are thinking about that has perhaps gone slightly wrong, a mistake that might have been made in the last couple of weeks. So something simple as misunderstanding the instructions for a task at work. You may not have done it correctly. You know, it's not anything's going to be serious, but it was a small mistake. So think about that. It could be a mistake that you made while learning something new. There have been lots of things that have gone on during lockdown. You may have said something on a Zoom thing with friends or family where you didn't think people were listening. You might have had a word out of turn, some kind of social faux pas when you thought someone wasn't listening, or when you're in lockdown with those you know and love, you might have snapped at somebody and regretted that you said it later. So a whole range of things that we've been doing in recent times. So lots of opportunities for us to think about those mistakes. So what happened? This is where you're going to note things down in whichever form, pen, paper, electronic. What were the consequences of what happened? Did you then have an opportunity to correct the mistake? And if so, how did it go and how did it make you feel? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on this. So what happened? What were the consequences? If you had an opportunity to correct the mistake, how did it go and how did it make you feel? So I'll give you another couple of minutes to reflect, because people think at different times and in different ways, and we want to include all sorts of thinking so people feel comfortable and have an opportunity. At the moment, we've been rushing around doing things, trying to make things right, moving into recovery and return. So having some reflective space is helpful. So hopefully now you've thought of a mistake, you've written what happened, the consequences, and if you had the opportunity to correct the mistake. So I'm not going to take the feedback yet. What we're going to do is we're going to move directly on to step 2. And I want you to reflect on what you've just written. What do you remember saying to yourself at the time about the mistake? Please be as honest as possible. What do you remember saying to yourself? What are the kinds of words that we say about each other? We call this self-talk when we're talking to ourselves. And it's also when I'm going around the supermarket reminding myself what to get. That's also self-talk. So think about what you said immediately afterwards, and then later, sometimes when I've said things where I've snapped at my husband or whatever it is that I've done, I feel awkward later, like I feel a little bit shameful. Why did I snap? Why didn't I have the patience with him, even though he's been doing the same thing for over 30 years of marriage? So I often bring in a bit of humour and try to think of as many phrases that you can recall as possible, and also things that you might say in a similar situation. It often springs to mind for me Homer Simpson in one of his duh moments when he knows he's done it and finally he remembers. So now that you've remembered the things that you have said to yourself, those awkward things, oh, why have I done this again? I'm always doing this, I'm that. We castigate ourselves in our self-talk. Moving on to step 3 now, then if you think about what's happened, is there a way that you would like to reframe any of your self-talk to be more tolerant of your mistake and to reflect a growth mindset? So one of the examples is to think of a yet phrase that we discussed earlier. I haven't managed it yet. I haven't managed not to lose my temper with my husband yet, but I know that by tomorrow I will have sorted that. So take a minute to reflect and write down how you might like to reframe this. I'll give you a minute to do that. And then we're going to take some of your thoughts. So if you want to start thinking about how you might share some of those thoughts in the Q&A, and I will go through and I will comment, or if you have any questions, I'll go through and I will comment and answer the questions. So first, how would you like to reframe it? To be tolerant of the mistake in yourself and reflect a growth mindset. And then when you're ready, if you want to start putting in the Q&A what the mistake was, so the whole process that you've gone through, if you feel you'd like to share that, share your learning. You can be anonymous, you don't have to say who you are. So Joe O'Shea is saying, how do you reassure people that mistakes or failures can be a good thing? So there are many examples in the world of where cures for things and innovations have come from mistakes that people have made. So if you find out some of those that are relevant to the area in which you work, so we know that there are many chemical changes, people experiment, so we get innovation from experimentation. Another important thing is to ensure people know that they will not be punished, and that you can give them some examples of where people have been rewarded for trying rather than punished for failure. Because it may be that although something went wrong, it enabled you as an organisation to see that your processes may not be as helpful as they could be. And they help you then to go back and look at how can we improve in future. And this is what we do. We have a continuous learning improvement culture, and we have a thing called even better if. So at the end of this webinar today, I will be having a debrief, which is an even better if. And we'll be thinking, what could we have done to prevent these slides from freezing? So we won't be blaming each other, and we will be going back to even the beginning, thinking about, so we had to use Teams for this when normally we use Zoom. Could we have learned a bit more about Teams? Could we have practiced a bit more? We really like Zoom. Do we have an emotional attachment because Zoom is much easier? I can control the slides myself. So we go through and we look at how could we improve for the future, but nobody will be blamed or punished. And we know that we haven't died because you had a little delay in the webinar, and that you are nice and patient people, and you know that we're human beings and not robots. So those are some of the things that you might be able to share. So what would be great now is if anyone could put up, if anyone's brave enough to publish, to put in the Q&A what your mistake was. Again, you can be anonymous, and what you said to yourself, how you reframed it, and how you feel now. So if anyone's got any questions or any experiences that they would like to share. I'll give you a few minutes to put those up. Thank you, Mandy. So Mandy's saying that she remembers thinking that her thing was very childlike, whatever the event was. And she would have been happier if she would have taken time out to look at how we could get this right by learning together. And that's a really good example, because sometimes we do things in the moment and then afterwards, when we regret them, we think, why did I revert back to that childlike behavior? Those are patterns that I've repeated from the past. And actually, I know now that that was an emotional response. I didn't wait for a moment to reflect on it. I just reacted emotionally in the moment. And so now what I would do differently in the future, she's saying, is I think that I would collaborate with that person. We could do it together. But after speaking with this colleague, Mandy is also saying that she's highlighted some learning difficulties. So that's something that has led to a positive outcome, because sometimes we might lose patience, or we think sometimes we make assumptions, don't we, that people might be doing things deliberately. And I know that when I've worked with people in the past, there may have been assumptions by others that they were behaving in a particular way because they were being awkward or they just didn't get it. But what we have found with a member of our team was that they have now been diagnosed as being on the autistic spectrum, and that helped them to realize their special gifts that they have to offer, and also that they may need to learn to operate with others in a different way, as well as the others learning to operate with them. So that's been helpful. Thank you for sharing that, Mandy. So moving on now to Sharon. Sharon, you were asked to comment on a WhatsApp group chat with your peers about a question asked in an interview in 2015, which was, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Gosh, oh my goodness, it is 5 years' time. So she said, I replied with a long reply about how professional you need to be, depends on the content, etc. It was a flippant, jokey question about no one perceiving that in 2020 we'd be in this situation. So she ends it with a lovely Homer Simpson moment, and she replied with, should have known, oops. So that's quite funny, but sometimes we feel stressed by a situation, don't we? And instead of seeing the humor in it, we don't actually see the person's motive, because we might be catastrophizing or being over emotional. And sometimes that happens when we're put on the spot and we have to reveal something about ourselves that we may not feel comfortable. So the idea that we are going to share all this serious stuff about 5 years' time. So Sharon, this is very sharing of you, is saying, I felt a bit of an idiot for not sussing it out. but at least it showed her experience in recruitment. Very good. Yeah, so I'll say something, Sharon. The ability to laugh at ourselves after the event is a really good thing to have. So turning that humour on ourselves, as long as self-deprecating humour isn't a ongoing thing for putting ourselves down, it's just a mechanism in the moment. Thank you for that. Yeah. So Sharon also goes on, that was exactly it. I was specifically asked to comment. Okay, great. So Anonymous is now saying documents received from a customer and you sat on them for a couple of weeks. So they should have been checked and sent on to another team. This caused delay, and the resolution was prompted by a chaser from the customer. So Anonymous felt embarrassed and foolish. Do you know what? We've all done these things. But now, in reframing it, nobody died. It was an easy thing to fix. So they'll do it immediately next time. So there's helpful learning. I beat myself up about it, Anonymous is saying, but I need to learn from the experience for the future. Yes, we all make mistakes, and yes, we can all learn from them. Thanks for sharing that, Anonymous. Any more reflections or questions or comments that anyone wants to share? Please feel free. I'll give you another minute for that. So those are really helpful and human examples that you've shared. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the next slide. And oh, I've got somebody here who's doing so. I'll just do this one. Thank you. Oh, it's a nice long one. I think it's Tiana, what a lovely name. I was jointly responsible for running a team call on WebEx. Knowing the senior manager had set up the call, but was on annual leave, none of us thought that we should have checked beforehand it had worked in his absence, or that someone had access to his to start the call. We simply did not consider this. So I felt really stupid, unprofessional, felt like we let everyone, for example, the presenters, down. We managed to get other hosts to take over because we couldn't access the manager's setup. So it was not a complete failure by another manager sending a new invite. So getting the other manager to send a new invite meant it wasn't a complete failure. However, it restricted numbers, and Tiana and the other hosts were unable to get onto the call. We could see but not hear anything, and we had a packed itinerary. So sadly, this meant that one presenter could not present and one was very rushed. Okay, so we learned that we should have checked beforehand and learned a very valuable lesson. I sent an apology to all the presenters and the attendees. I still felt bad for a day. Yes, and what it did was it helped you to learn how to do it differently. We all wish that we hadn't done it like that in the first place. But the learning is what we take away from this, not those burning feelings of shame that we've messed up. Yes, we messed up. Let's forgive ourselves. So what I want to do now is to ask you to reflect on what have you learned about the way that you see mistakes, and how helpful is it to think in this growth mindset way? And the third question we've got for you is, what will you do differently in the future? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on those questions and then to share them again in the Q&A. I think you're a very good and sharing group. We've had some fantastic insights and learning from each other. And our fears when we were starting to do these online was that, because you know that when we work with you, we're very interactive in the room and we walk amongst you, and you know, we really enjoy the vibe that we get from you. We were worried that people wouldn't interact, and they have, and in a very open and human way. So thank you. So what have you learned about the way that you see mistakes? How helpful is thinking in this growth mindset way? And what will you do differently in the future? if anyone wants to share any of the three answers to the three questions, you don't have to answer all of them, but it'd be great to hear your responses. Mandy, thank you. You count to 5, put yourself in their shoes, use every opportunity for growth and development. That's great, thank you. Sharon, you've learned that no one ever dies from these mistakes, hopefully not. If you're in a hospital or something like that, or you're driving dangerously, that might be the case. So I'll have to have a legal get out here for all of you lawyers who are on this. So we don't normally die from these mistakes. Thank you, Sharon. And a growth mindset, yes, Sharon, again, it takes the pressure out of the situation, absolutely. But we put ourselves under these pressures, don't we? So how can we take ourselves out of those pressures? Yes. And what are people going to do differently in the future? So take take it on the chin and see what we can learn from it. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, we'll take it on the chin, see what we can learn from it. Will, great, thanks for sharing. I've learned that I need to focus on what I'm required to do to feel good or succeed, whether this means yoga once a week, so my body feels mobile, or carrying out the required training, for example, for a health and safety test, so I don't feel the regret of failing. That's a really good one. Thank you, Will. Sharon says, in your world, it's unlikely anyone will die. Phew, I'm glad about that. Thank you, Sharon. Anonymous saying mistakes are rarely catastrophic. Use them as aids to sharpen future performance. That's lovely. Thank you. Really nicely put. Anonymous also turn feelings of shame into learning and pragmatism. Avoids trying to cover up the mistake and encourages transparency and improvement to the process. Be completely open about something going wrong, even before the fix has been applied, rather than bringing it up once it's fixed, which is what I did. I started thinking, oh, these slides aren't moving on. We better do something about it. Yes, because that means that you feel okay about yourself and you don't mind people seeing that you've done something wrong. Okay, so Tiana, you're saying that you're your own worst critic, and often others are kinder. That is so true. We're often more cruel to ourselves. So I'm a great believer in self-compassion. So Tiana's saying mistakes simply teach you something that you didn't know before. Olivia, I didn't think I had a fixed mindset, but actually I'm really hard on myself if I make a mistake. Okay, so Olivia from DWF Law, you're going to be thinking more about a growth mindset. Anonymous says growth mindset is helpful because it encourages and nurtures development. It will help to free me from the chains of imposter syndrome. Yes, fantastic. And Julie, you're going to reflect with a focus on what you'll do differently next time. Practice, win, learn, and change. Some really, really good comments there. Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to ask now to move on to the key takeaways. So we're reaching the end of our time together, and I wanted to leave a bit of time for some questions. So I'm just going to talk you through your take-home messages, which I think you've summarised really nicely in your comments there. So we remember that Professor Carol Dweck uses the terms fixed mindset and growth mindset to describe the underlying beliefs that people have about learning and intelligence. The main differences are that a fixed mindset avoids challenges and may give up easily in the face of difficulties, whereas the growth mindset will see opportunities as a way of developing further, that failure is not seen as the end, but as a chance to learn. That's the growth mindset. If you want to build a growth mindset, you have to consider praising wisely. That means praising yours, so praising yourself, self-compassion, and other people's hard work, your strategies, your focus and perseverance rather than your intelligence. And changing your mindset by using terms such as yet or not yet. Then every challenge starts to become an opportunity to thrive and succeed. And learning together and sharing knowledge all along the way. So there's an opportunity to learn from each other, teaching people and learning from others. We're all teachers and we're all learners. You've also considered your own experience and looked for ways to reframe what you may previously seen as mistakes, and you've turned those from mistakes into opportunities to learn. So we hope that you've found this webinar helpful. Before we move, we're going to move on to questions. If there's anything that you would like to know, please email us or visit us. And also, if there are any other webinars that you would like, please let Pro Manchester know the subjects that you think we might be able to deliver for you. So if at this stage you have to go because you've got to get teed up for your next team or Zooms meeting, please bear in mind that we'd be happy to support you in any way we can. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you want more information, but also it will be great if you wanted to sign up for our bulletin. We're going to be putting out a bulletin later today about our response to Black Lives Matter, which I think people will find interesting. So if you want to keep up to date with our news and views, please sign up for our bulletin. So moving on to questions. If anyone has any questions, please post them as we have been doing, and I'll go through as many as I can. But if you have to go, thank you for listening. Please post any questions. I'm happy to answer them, or any comments. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. It's lovely to connect with you all again. So any questions or comments? Yeah, Sharon, do have to dash. Okay, great. Thanks, Sharon. Lovely to hear from you. Thank you. How to deal with imposter syndrome. Okay, yeah, we will note that down. Thank you. Sorry to ask what was my name again. That's lovely. I really like that. My name is Shelley Rubenstein, and I'm from Impact Psychology for Business. I think that's great. Sometimes we don't want to ask those kinds of questions because we think, oh, we'll be embarrassed, but I'm really happy to tell you that I'm Shelley Rubenstein. Thank you, Claire. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Fanny. Thanks, Claire. So we're here for another couple of minutes if anyone is trying to frame their questions or comments, or as I've said, if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to email us. Thank you, Claire. So Will's asking, any advice on connecting with your line manager? So Will, I think it depends on how long you've been working with your line manager. Just to interrupt, Anonymous is saying, will we be sharing the slides afterwards? Yes, we'll be sharing the slides. Pro Manchester will be sending those to everyone later. So when you're to connect with your line manager, it's about getting to know them, walking in their shoes, finding out something about them that is of an interest to both of you, appreciating their point of view and listening to them. So maybe having a coffee or a virtual coffee and saying, we don't get to spend so much time together, it'd be really helpful to get to know each other. You know, what are you interested in? Because if you show an interest in somebody, they're more likely to connect with you. And of course, this depends on, are you geographically remote? Do you work in the same office? Is it always rushed? So those are some of the things that I think would help. But if you want to have a longer conversation about that, please feel free to contact me. Boltonian, how do you maintain growth mindset when things are increasingly difficult? Yes, that is a challenge. It's not a magic wand, and it's about sharing with like-minded colleagues or friends, having someone to offload to that is not moaning. But if at the end of it you give yourself positive self-talk, and if you consciously try to reframe things, then you will be hearing yourself saying how that was a learning opportunity. It wasn't that bad. So when things are increasingly difficult, I know that during this period, it has been a challenge. And I'm not saying that I do this perfectly every day. There's a phrase that I have, which is, I am a work in progress. We have to forgive ourselves, and we have to have compassion, self-compassion. So I can see now that it is 11 o'clock rather, and we've run out of time. So thank you everyone for your lovely comments. It's really kind of you to say that. Anonymous, if you want to send that to me, I'll be delighted to answer that question, but you'll have to give me an email because I know that we've run out of time. So I'll be really delighted to talk to Anonymous about your lost job. If you want to contact me in confidence, I'd be very happy to do that. So thank you very much for listening. I understand that we have to finish the programme now, but thank you once again.